fellow Toolboxers. Welcome to episode number 354 of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox podcast. A little bit different this one. The interview that we're having is with a non-immigration lawyer, a person who's involved in the economics of immigration, studying it at the Cato Institute, Nowrasteh. So it should be interesting getting kind of different perspective, a person taking the heat for talking about immigration. So that should be fun talking about that. Before we start, I want to let everyone know that the E2 session, the live session we're having, is almost fully booked. I'm getting small groups, just 6 people, so it's a more personal affair, and we could just have more conversation. If you're interested in this one's probably going to fill up by the time you hear this, but if you're interested in getting lessons and training in E2, that's what the session is all about, email me so you can get notified when the next one opens up. This one in particular is about a change of status to E2 that was less than $100,000, real estate developer kind of thing. So it was interesting. Gifted funds, all these different nuances that are problematic, and it went through Nowrasteh in a couple of days, really, premium processing. So we're gonna go over the details of how that all worked out, how the paperwork looked. I've redacted the whole thing, so sharing that with the people that are in the live session. So that should be a lot of fun. Other than that, we have a marriage green card course. If you want to learn how to be an immigration lawyer like I am, where I have so much time to do this podcast and magazine and still live in LA. This is marriage immigration, family immigration. It's a blessing to be able to do this. And we do a full-on 18+ hour course to get you in on it. If you're trying to go from removal practice to a family-based practice, if you're an insurance defense attorney tired of it, you want to switch over, or we have people who've been doing this for 10 years, but they want to go through the process because you have the video series, you have one-on-ones, we have group chats monthly, and then we go through the statute, the regulations. And I'm like a central location because I'm out there. I get all the information out there, not all of it, but people contact me all the time, and then we know this going on, that's going on. So I have access and privy to so much different pieces of data that I try to, through this podcast, put out too. But it's just hard to organize it all and put it out there. So with these courses, I can have it in a place where I say, I learned this, I learned that a lot of other people don't know. So that's what these points of these live sessions, these courses, seminars, all the stuff we're doing is. And I just want to get better at doing this. We do more because there's a lot of demand for it. And I have a lot of fun talking about immigration law, as you know, in the last 354 episodes of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox podcast. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks a bunch for having me.
Course, yeah. So why don't we start for people to know about you, because you're immigration law adjacent. This is a show for immigration lawyers and stuff. Where'd you grow up, and what leads you to the path to get so involved with immigration?
So I grew up in Southern California, in Los Angeles, and right north of the city in Camarillo. And I got involved in immigration because I have a background in economics and social science. And immigration is one of these great subjects that never gets boring. So it touches on every aspect of social science, right? Like economics, wages, the fiscal effect, how much welfare do they use? Do they culturally integrate and assimilate? Crime rates, terrorism. And then by the time, terrorism is boring, you can go back and work on wages again. And it allows you to just really study in a deep way how the United States works and how it works differently from so many other country. So I don't have an immigrant personal story that's interesting or different. It just allows me to learn so much more about this country in an interesting way.
Well, I went to I didn't go to high school in Thousand Oaks, but I lived in Thousand Oaks when I was in high school. I went to Oak Park. Did you go to Camarillo High or around there?
Yeah, I went to Cam High. So if you're driving north on the 101, you see it on the right. It has the bleachers with a giant blue scorpion painted there.
How far is it from the outlets? Is it before or after outlets coming from LA?
It's before the outlets. I actually used to work at the outlets. This will be an old reference, but I used to sell women's shoes at Naturalizer in the outlets, like Al Bundy.
What year did you graduate high school?
2002.
Oh, wow. We're same. Yeah. So we're the same on 2002 as well. So we're same age. Okay. Well, really neat.
Did you play tennis?
So close. I'm sorry.
Did you play tennis in high school?
I got cut. I didn't play good enough, so they wouldn't put me on the team.
So we may have played each other then.
Yeah, Oak Park and Camarillo.
11th grade.
For sure. Well, that's cool. We're like neighbors essentially. Now, economics. Cato had a bifurcation of which when it originally started. You're part of the Cato Institute. I should actually probably go into this economics argument that no one other than some like two people are going to be interested in. What is your current role right now, and what institution do you work for?
So I'm the vice president for economic and social policy studies at the Cato Institute. The Cato Institute is a Washington, D.C. based think tank. It's a libertarian think tank, and we work on policy issues as varied as foreign policy, constitutional law, education, taxes, budget, the environment, immigration, and really everything in between.
I see. And so you study economics. Are there any particular schools of economics that you subscribe to, or is it kind of a mix and match, or what would you say your background is like close to?
So I'm pretty boring. I just like normal neoclassical economics. I don't pick and choose, I think sometimes Austrian economists have interesting things to say. Sometimes monetarists have great things to say. Sometimes Keynesians have things to say that are interesting, although less often.
Yeah, I was gonna
Sometimes they
say
have things.
I'm
Yeah,
not a
sometimes
Keynesian.
they
Yeah,
no, I'm not. I'm not. But sometimes they have like some points in some of their
yeah.
models that are pretty useful. So I'm really like ecumenical in terms of school. So I just say like normal economics, the stuff that you pick up in your microeconomics or price theory textbook is
Hmm.
basically what I look at and use.
Like I'm on the Ron Paul side of the Federal Reserve argument and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but which is like we shouldn't have a centralized institution like almost a temple coming out and making interest rates willy nilly based on a whim, essentially. But when it was created, it was had parts of it had to do with the earthquake that happened in San Francisco, and they run out of money supply. So the ability to kind of rush money into areas where deflation has happened rapidly. I'm like, okay, I can see that potentially as a use, and then using the Fed as a clearinghouse for checks, that might be a point, but that could be outsourced too. But I can see where some of these arguments may come into place, but it's such a dangerous weapon to use that I'm like, it's better we don't have it. It's kind of like nukes or something, nuclear weapons or something. It's better. It's interesting, but it's such a powerful weapon that it's probably better no one has it. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think like check clearing and all those were done through private institutions prior to the creation of a central
That's
bank
true.
in the United States. The central bank creation was really to support fiscally a lot of federal government activities and to remedy many of the problems created by state regulations of the banking industry at that time, which created a lot of the enormous problems that we had later with the Great Depression, or at least exacerbated a lot of those
Yeah.
enormous problems. I mean, interestingly, Canada didn't have a central bank, I think, until the late 1930s, if I remember correctly. But they also didn't have all these provincial level banking regulations. So they didn't have a single banking failure in the Great
Mm.
Depression, not one. Whereas the United States, a huge percentage of banks failed because of these mishmash government regulations. So, like the Fed was sort of a quasi answer to problems created by regulations in other areas. And of course, the biggest failure of the Fed was that it was the institution that caused the Great Depression. So, when the economy was slowing down in the late 1920s, the Fed reacted. It basically did the opposite of what central bankers would do today and shrank the money supply. And as a result, that is the number one theory that economists have for why the Great Depression was so severe and so long. So we can really blame the Fed for the biggest economic catastrophe of the United States. I think they've gotten better, to be sure,
Yeah.
you know, but there's a lot of problems. And if we want to talk about ending the Fed, it would be a huge undertaking that would
Yeah.
require unwinding the multi-trillion dollar assets that they hold. And I
Well,
have no idea how to do that. And we'd have to talk to my colleagues.
Well, the cancer has gone so like immexed in like every part of the body and bones and lungs and stuff that you can't. It's too late. So that's a harsh way to look at it, but it's kind of I see it. I'm after the 2009 bailouts. I mean, before that, long-term capital management, like 90s and 80s, and just bailout after bailout gets to a point where it's just at this point like you can't throw the baby out with bathwater or the bathwater without the baby. So we're kind of stuck with the situation. Yeah,
We are, and then the moral hazard that creates, right? Like the
yeah, that's a
fact
big
that
problem.
financial institutions know with a pretty high degree of certainty
Yeah.
that they will be bailed out if they are facing insolvency or bankruptcy, just creates a terrible incentive where the government has essentially socialized a lot of the losses
Hmm.
in many types of financial firms and industry and sectors, while privatizing profits.
Yeah.
And I think, as we just know, like basic economics, if you if you support people when they have problems, you're probably going to get more problems.
Yeah. And it's at these big numbers, and it's just not the financial institutions anymore. Any big industrial company,
Oh
not
yeah.
to name names right now, you see them failing, but they're not going to fail because they're too big to fail at this point. It just a lot of centralization is happening. So on going off that tangent, so with immigration, one aspect you mentioned is H-1Bs. There's a contingent of people that say like H-1B workers are affecting wages, and it's a way like it's a tool for corporations to keep down domestic worker wages and stuff like that. Is that what do you think about those arguments? I don't really know, but like I have an opinion on it myself. But there's a low end labor, which is this people come to the border affecting lower end wages and affecting like the ceiling and the lower that could go. But on H1B and the tech sector and stuff, is this some sort of like way tech companies are doing to keep the wages low in that sector?
It's not what we observe. So, economic theory actually predicts that there wouldn't really be wage effects from a big increase in the supply of labor. And part of the reason is that the demand curve for labor is pretty flat or elastic, as economists say. So, you increase supply, doesn't really affect wages that much. And then by having more people here, that increases demand, right? Because people buy things. So,
Mm-hmm.
there's more demand for goods and services that creates more jobs in other sectors of the economy. What we see really with H-1Bs and other high skilled workers is that firms hire them when they are expanding. And we really see like this international market for a lot of high skilled workers where wages don't really differ that much between economies where there's relatively comparably high levels of like productivity. So we don't really see negative wage effects from immigration. Maybe some sectors of the economy here or there, we can occasionally find something that looks like it. But overall, we should expect basically net zero effects of immigration on the wages of Americans.
Very interesting. Uh, Now, what about the big thing right now? The controversy here they're saying is crime statistics that are affected
Hmm.
by immigrants coming in. There's been like statistics that come in and out, and statistics are so hard to even like believe what's what really. But what do you see was happening with the accusations of increased crime to immigration?
So the big problem with this is we know pretty well like incarceration rates for all immigrants, and they have been lower for all immigrants compared to native born Americans, basically going back for as long as we have data, back to the 19th century and in recent years and decades as well. But you say that to an audience and they say, okay, fine, I believe that for legal immigrants. But what about illegal immigrants? They broke laws, they came here unlawfully, overstayed a visa. What about them? And so I was one of the first researchers, well, the first researcher to really dig into this question and found that the state of Texas actually keeps criminal conviction and arrest data by immigration status. It's the only state so far that I've been able to find that actually does this. No other states do it. So there's very little data. And what we find in Texas is that illegal immigrants, focusing on murder, for instance, on homicide, have a criminal conviction rate 26% below that of native born Americans, while legal immigrants are the least crime prone of all, with a criminal conviction rate about 61% below native born Americans. And so, based on the evidence we have, I mean, it just looks like across the board, as far as we can tell, immigrants, whether they're legal immigrants, illegal immigrants, undocumented, however you want to slice it or define it, have lower crime rates than native born Americans. And what's truly amazing with all this is that illegal immigrants have some demographic characteristics where you would expect they'd be more crime prone. They're more likely to be men, and it's probably not news to your listeners, but men commit the vast majority of crimes. They're more likely to be younger, which is really where who commit crimes. They're more likely to be poorer, and they're more likely to be ethnic and racial minorities. So all those things are correlated with committing higher crimes. And so taking those things into account, it's actually astounding how low the crime rate is for illegal immigrants in the United States.
What about like the recent migrants? Has there truly been a larger number coming in during the Biden administration than before through the southern border? And those demographics change? Is it possible that some countries are unloading their like prison population, to, like stuff like that happening?
So there's been a big increase, of course, in people coming across the border the last several years. It really started to pick up in late 2020 during the tail end of the Trump administration when the labor market started to recover. And then the labor market, the number of jobs increased dramatically under Biden as a recovery from, the disaster during COVID. And as a result of that, the number of people coming in unlawfully just went through the roof because the labor demand here was so extraordinary, and places like Venezuela were collapsing, Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti, these other countries in Central and South America were just collapsing under totalitarian socialism to just incredible depths of despair. And so we have a few years of crime data for 2021 and 2022. What's interesting is 2022, illegal immigrants in Texas had a homicide conviction rate 36% below native born Americans. And we need some more years to really be able to tell what the criminal effects
Mm-hmm.
are, because some people may come in, they may be migrants, they may wait a few years before committing crime, and we can't really tell till then. But so far, based on the evidence we have, we don't see a surge in crime rates or a crime spree driven by immigration like usual. Crime rates in the US move most dramatically because of crime committed by native born Americans.
Mm-hmm. Well, where are you living out right now? What part of the country? You're in DC?
Yeah, I work in DC. I live in Northern Virginia.
Wonderful. Now I'm in LA, and like there's a homeless crisis here, big time, and
Yeah.
a home robbery kind of crisis. That's been increasing. That's to me, that's probably economics because the economy is the bifurcation of the status of the middle class disappearing, and then rich getting richer, poor getting bigger. I get the feeling that's happening. Is there any truth to that? Is it just a feeling I having, or as an economist, do you see that actually happening?
So what's interesting is the economics of crime are a pretty interesting subject, and it's hard to figure out what causes what. So is it the person is a criminal and they commit crimes and they're poor because they commit crimes and get caught, or do they commit crimes because they're poor?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like it's more the former, where people commit crimes, and the type of people commit crimes, they don't really think about the future that
Yeah.
much. They're not really productive workers. And as a result of being in contact with the criminal justice system, they're just not going to have a successful career or job. And so I think that explains a lot of it. There is some evidence when recessions get worse that sometimes there's an uptick in property crime, but the evidence is really mixed on that.
Mm-hmm.
It really just takes like a special type of person to commit a lot of these types of crimes. And I think one of the other things to focus on is, what has happened to policing and criminal enforcement in some of these cities. So during COVID, the police pulled back in a big way. Law enforcement. After the murder of George Floyd, the police pulled back a little bit. And then you had all that chaos.
Yeah.
You remember like riots and other crime like that really sort of exploded. And I think there was a real sense of just like insane public disorder. So like I take the metro every day. I take the bus or the train every day. And you just saw this like incredible decline in late 2020, early 2021, up through 2022 of just like public disorder, like
Mm-hmm.
homeless people on the trains, harassing people, fights, crimes on the train, things that you just didn't normally see. Like I come from a fairly like upper middle class to upper class suburb and coming to the city every day. And you would see this type of shenanigan, like way out shenanigans out in the suburbs on the train, which I had never seen before. And I've been commuting in the city for like 15 years. So there was a real sense of like chaos that built up. And I'm sure you saw it too in LA,
Oh yeah.
just like out of control.
Yeah. And just the
And
police,
it's
like,
what,
yeah, if I call 911
yeah,
here, it's going to take 20 minutes for them to even answer the phone call. So it's just not there.
it's, yeah, it's not there, right? And I think this is what's going on with immigration too. Like you've probably seen Gallup does this poll about do you want more immigration, less immigration, or about the same level, and they've been doing this since the '60s. And we haven't seen numbers of people anti-immigration in these polls like this in a long time, in decades. And I think a lot of that is because people see the chaos along the border, and nobody likes chaos.
Hmm.
They freak out and they turn out, it turns them against what they're seeing in a big way. So if all these people, instead of coming illegally and crossing the border and asking for asylum and all this sort of chaos and the chaotic images, if they just flew in legally or took a bus or drove in, right, lawfully, I just think that this would be like a second or third tier issue rather than being one of the top issues in the campaign.
Yeah. With regard to crime, there's one thing I saw Jordan Peterson once say is a lot of it, the number one factor or something like that, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, is like the perception. So if someone is feeling that like the richer, like different group and we're getting smaller, it's just that stratification of groups that causes more, something like that. So I'm killing what he was saying, but I guess it's just a conundrum because it's a good life here living in Los Angeles. And again, when you look at the whole world, you're like, wow, like we live in a really top notch life. And some of the chaos we have is more daily for other people, especially with the wars going on and everything like that. But finding solutions is really important. Now, you're one of the most hot button subjects there are. And I see you on Twitter and stuff for years now. Did you realize what hornet's nest you're knocking over by talking about these matters, and how crazy is it for you being that person?
So when I first started working on immigration in 2007, I thought it would become a bigger issue. I did not anticipate that it would be the number one issue for like 8 years in a row. That's kind of crazy. But it's I thought I would be knocking over hornet's nest by writing about terrorism and immigration and writing about crime and immigration and integration and assimilation, because I'm really pushing back against a lot of popular and incorrect notions that people have about the severity and the rate of crime and terrorism and all this other problems caused by immigration. I mean, my basic statement is yes, crime and terrorism are horrible. We should punish criminals and terrorists. We should stop them from coming to the United States, no matter how they want to come. But they are much less of a danger than you think they are. And when we see dramatic news stories that are terrible of a crime committed or a terrorist attack committed by somebody who's foreign born, we need to realize that those are the exceptions
Yeah.
that prove the rule. And when we take a look at the annual chance of being murdered by like a foreign born terrorist, right, on US soil, it's about 1 in 4.5 million a year.
Yeah.
By comparison, your chance of getting murdered is about 1 in 20,000 per year in a normal homicide, right? Like,
Well,
we just should not be talking about it that much or spending trillions of dollars on this problem. We should do some things to keep them away, right?
mm-hmm.
But we need to make sure that what we're trying to do to stop these things, that it makes sense, that the benefits equal the costs of doing it. And all of these anti-terrorism efforts cost an extraordinary amount of money. They infringe on our civil liberties. They make us a less peaceful country. And there is a world where that stuff makes sense, but it's not the world we live in. It's the world of science fiction. And so we're really wasting a lot on this and frankly taking our eyes off of some issues that really do kill a lot more people than terrorism.
Mm-hmm. Well, back when we graduated high school, as after 9/11, there was this couple of Congress people got like envelopes with white powder in them, and so I would see driving down Thousand Oaks, like people would have what is it called, like gloves on when they would get their mail because they thought that would be sent to them, and it was just like
Yeah.
an impossibility that they would be affected by that. And now it's coming out that someone was saying the two like Congress people who got it were the two people who are anti-war, so it's could have been inside jobs and stuff. Who knows? But it's the human mind takes some things and runs with them, and then forgets what's actually in front of them. That's a psychological
Yeah,
factor.
there is this poll that was put out by the I think it was the Public Policy Research Institute, like Public Religion Research Institute, and it's like 8 or 9 years old, but it said something like 50% of Americans think that they or a member of their family could be injured in a terrorist attack, and that's just so extraordinarily ridiculous. where you take a look at, like, if you're to do an actual poll and say, like, have you or your family members been killed or injured in a terrorist attack? Um, the numbers would be so small they won't even show up on the poll. They basically statistically be zero. So it's an issue, right? And it's a dramatic issue, and the government should do some things to try to reduce it. But they shouldn't be doing what they're doing now, and they shouldn't be trying to scare us all the time. And we shouldn't be focused on these big issues. Like, for instance, during the Biden administration so far, there have been zero Americans killed by foreign-born terrorists in attacks on U.S. soil. Zero. And there's been one person injured. And that person in a terrorist attack was Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, who was injured in an assassination attempt targeting his wife by a Canadian right winger.
Was that the guy that went in
It's
his
like,
house and like the police came and stuff?
yeah, and he tried to kill, and so I count like political assassinations as terrorism because it's politically motivated violence,
Hmm.
and that's counted by the government as a terrorist attack. But like,
Well, I guess with the Trump
that's the one.
shooting, Trump assassination attempt being part of that too.
It would be, but those were committed by native-born
Oh, that's true. I
Americans,
see. I see.
right?
Yeah.
So committed by, so yes, if I were doing the accounting of native-born Americans, those would definitely count on there. And I have counted native-born Americans at different times in my analyses, but the thing is, nobody cares about them. So it basically like increases the amount of work I have to do by like a factor of 10, and nobody cares. So I decided to take a look at the cost-benefit analysis and not do it
Okay. I hear you.
anymore.
Well, interesting, Alex. Thank you so much for coming on, talk about this stuff. It's something everyone really has to watch and listen to because it affects everything that we do, all the policy decisions we make, and even on your life. Like leaving your house in the morning. Some people are really think about that. They're like losing their mind and worrying about stuff that's like something to think about, but there's like literally car accident. There's more chance happening. Having safer driving situation in Los Angeles, the way of stop and go traffic, that probably causes so much death and destruction and waste that on a daily basis. That I wish that would be dealt with first because that could hit everybody
Yeah,
anytime.
there's 40 to 50,000 people a year who die in traffic accidents in the United
Yeah.
States.
And so many others have
That's
back pains. There's like whole industries of doctors and chiropractors dealing with this that people just get damaged, in the process. So thanks for coming on, Alex. If people want to follow you, reach you, what's the best way to do that?
So you can take a look at Cato's website. That's cato.org. Or you can follow me on Twitter. It's at Alex Nowrasteh on Twitter. And you can follow me there. I also have a Substack. It's just alexnowrasteh.com. And you can sign up for my Substack. I'll send weekly articles that I write about this and related issues.
Now, when Elon took over Twitter and he redid the
Yeah.
algorithm, were you one of the shadow ban people? Did you see like a burst in upward of your followers, or was this just the same?
It's about the same.
I see.
It was pretty similar. I think it improved a lot for the first maybe year and a
Yeah.
half on Twitter. I do think it's a private platform. They can do whatever they want
Yeah.
in terms of banning people. But I did think they went overboard
Hmm.
before Elon. And so I was really happy to see, some people, even if I don't like them or agree with them, sort of returned. Now I get like such a cesspool of like just nasty, racist, anti-Semitic comments all the time. It's kind of annoying. Um, but I think on net it's been
Hmm.
better with Elon in charge. Absolutely. Even if I have to deal with more, more crap like that. I haven't got any. I've gotten like a few doxings on Twitter. Um, People like dox my address. They put like photos up of like burning bodies, and they put like an arrow to it and say like this is where Alex lives and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So pretty nasty, and they've been pretty good about taking that stuff down. But no, I haven't really been affected by any of the social media nonsense.
Yeah, see, my feed used to be all this like random stuff that pushed me. I'm like, well, I don't even care about this stuff I'm talking about. Then it got good, and it's like, oh, it's interesting to learn. Now everything is just about politics on my feed. I'm like, I don't care. Like, it's, not,
It's,
it's the
there's a
same
lot of
political stuff.
crap
Just
out there.
videos of rallies, and he said this, Kamala said this, or Trump's. I'm like, it's just like it's like gossip almost. I'm like, I don't really listen to this.
One thing I noticed is like the huge uptick in people trying to sell me like cryptocurrencies, and the number of people who are if they're not prostitutes, they are like have OnlyFans accounts, and they're just like they were like I'll put out a post about some new academic paper about the wage impact of immigration, and they're like, "Hey, check out my nudes in the bio," and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Why? Why? What is this? Like, what is this
Yeah.
nonsense?"
I've definitely seen the crypto
Um,
stuff because I'll read comments and it's just like it's almost like ads placed in your feed by the thing itself. Yeah.
yeah, so there's a lot of bots I think on there, and I know Elon wanted to declare war on the bots, but I'm not sure if the bots are winning or not.
Yeah, that's gonna be a hard one with the AI, the way it's working, all that kind of stuff. Are you working on stuff on the effect of AI on the job market and economics and stuff, or
Not much. It's other economists are doing some like pretty interesting work in this. The thing is, economists haven't been great or very good at all at predicting where like efficiency gains will come from with new
Mhm.
technologies. So, for instance, like electricity, when electricity was developed and commercially available in the late 19th and early 20th century, it really took until the 1920s and 1930s for the productivity gains to show up. So, it might be one of these things where we humans have to figure out how to use these
Yeah.
tools to increase productivity. And we're just not really seeing it. It might also be that, a lot of these measures of productivity just they're usually not great.
Hmm.
So we need to figure out better ways of figuring it out. Or it could be that AI is just a better tool to distract us from work. And we'll see like productivity declines in that way. But I mean, I use AI every day. I use it for coding. If I'm coding statistics,
Interesting.
statistical analysis and statistical software, I'll use it. I use it for like lit surveys. I use it
What
every
surveys?
day. Literature surveys. So like if I'll say like, what do economists think about this topic, and then it'll post a bunch of different papers,
Oh, neat.
and I'll say like write up what the general consensus is in the
Oh,
literature.
interesting.
So a literature survey.
Oh, very
Yeah.
interesting.
So I use it for that. Like I use Perplexity and Chat GPT, and they're wonderful tools. It's just there's that old joke about Paul Krugman who says like the internet's effect on productivity will be about the same as the fax machine.
Mhm.
He wrote that like 20 years ago. And the funny thing is, like, you look at the productivity statistics, and that's basically right. But I think that means there's a problem with the productivity statistics because that just feels so
Mhm.
wrong based on all my experience working anyway.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Stick around for a second. We end the show, but it was fun. It's good to have different type of guests on the show. So thanks so much.
Thanks a bunch, John. I appreciate it.
Well, that was cool. I like having different kinds of people coming on the show. There's another person that's part of the Cato Institute that they reached out and but probably get him on the show. But next episodes we have the AILA's NBC meeting, so we're gonna go over some points I saw from there and just a bunch of the regular stuff we do. So thanks for listening so much for the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox podcast. And if you want to get involved and learn lessons in the E2 course series, I guess I'm going to be a series that we're going to do. Hit me up if there's demand. We'll just keep doing it. We'll go through all these E2 cases I've done one by one and analyze the pros and cons and issues, all that kind of stuff. Just hit me up, info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. Again, that's info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. I'm immigration lawyer John Castrovi. I wish you all the best. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.